Hello and welcome to the debate on Sky News. I'm Martin Stanford. Here's our take on some interesting opinion we brought together from America, the UK and around the world this week. The Ferguson backlash, a wave of violent civil unrest sweeps the States. Hugs and platitudes as Hagel leaves the Pentagon. And Black Friday, how much have you spent this weekend? Echoes from the grand jury ruling in Ferguson have reverberated throughout the United States. There were violent protests right across the country. Well, as usual, the Democrat commentator Geoffrey is standing by for us in New York. Conservative commentator Armstrong Williams is joining us in Washington. They'll be with us throughout the show. Armstrong, can I start with you on this occasion? What do you think went wrong in Ferguson?
Well, the grand jury made the right decision. There was no other decision to make. If you follow the forensic evidence, the blood splatter, everything that Officer Wilson testified was corroborated not only by the forensic evidence and the blood splattering, but also many witnesses who also saw exactly what he testified as the sin. It is unfortunately that there are many people in this country that feel that justice is not blind when it comes to certain people, especially African-American men and law enforcement, and they just assume that all their hopes of final justice would rise and fall on this case. They just chose the wrong case. There's no way that a grand jury could have recommended any indictment of Officer Wilson. Our system works. The jury has shown that. As far as the rioters and the looters, you could say that many of these people are outsiders, but they're young people who have not been raised properly by their parents. They have no parenting in the household. You look at the boyfriend of the victim's mother who yelled, "Burn it down, burn it down." He reflects a certain mindset that is very dangerous. He should be arrested. As long as those looters and those that rioted and burned those businesses, there is no excuse for them to burn and commit criminal activity because they cannot embrace the grand jury's decision. So obviously, the grand jury got it right, but the looters and the rioters got it wrong.
Let me bring in Geoffrey here. Do you think it was unfortunate the authorities waited until 8 o'clock local time, until the middle of the evening, until it was dark before they released the decision?
You understand that Bob McCullough, the prosecutor, is a politician. He's elected to that job. And the reason he waited till 8 or 9 o'clock was so that he personally could have primetime U.S. television. He wanted national recognition for this. It's disgraceful, and I am utterly shocked that Armstrong has taken the view that the grand jury decision was correct. It was a blatant manipulation of the grand jury. I read the transcripts, and what I was shocked about, first of all, McCullough did not address the grand jury because he would not take that risk. He stayed aloof. Again, a politician playing politics with the justice system is disgusting. He sent in 2 assistants who were both pretty weak, who actually did not cross-examine Officer Wilson. They examined him, but under no circumstances did they push him, nor did they encourage the grand jury to ask questions, which they're entitled to do. I think one juror asked a question, but it was all very tame. And it proved, if nothing else, that Officer Wilson did not live up to his training. He was not properly trained because he made a number of mistakes. I could go into them, but all you have to do is read the transcript. It's there. The American public did not learn the lesson, or the justice system did not learn the lesson of the Trayvon Martin killing a year ago. And this is the example, yet again, of justice not being blind, of a politician directing justice one way for a white shooter and a black victim. It would not have gone down this way if the victim had been white. I guarantee that.
Well, let's see if we can explore that later in the conversation. But joining me now from Washington is the Washington civil rights activist, Dr. Julian Malvo. Dr. Malvo, thank you for being with us. Many people disappointed with the president's reaction to this outcome, not just for the reason that maybe he would be criticised by his political opponents anyway, but also presidential supporters were disappointed with his reaction. Do you understand that?
Absolutely. President Obama is caught juggling. He's caught on the fence, as he frequently is, especially in matters of race. Whatever he said, the right wing was going to be angry. And whatever he said, quite frankly, the left wing was going to be angry. It was a very measured statement. In that measured statement, of course, he could not criticize the justice system, but it was a measured statement that missed the sense of anger that so many people felt. I think about the Langston Hughes poem, What Happened to a Dream Deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Does it fester like a sore and then run? Maybe it sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? What happened in Ferguson was an explosion. It's inexcusable to deal with property in the way it did, but you had a lot of frustration combined with a prosecutor who cynically manipulated the situation. He not only wanted prime time, Geoffrey, but he also wanted to manipulate, almost setting these activists up. Imagine what would have happened if this decision had been shared at 9 a.m., at noon, at 2 p.m.
Well, what do you think would have happened if it had come out mid-morning?
I think there would have been a much more tame response. I think that people, frankly, tend to act out more in the evening. I think there would have been protests. I think they would have been robust and angry. I'm not sure they would have been as violent.
Dr. Julian Malvo, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining us now from Chicago is the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who's spoken out about the events in Ferguson. Reverend Jackson, what was your initial reaction when you heard the outcome of the grand jury decision?
Well, it was painfully predictable. The jury concluded that Mr. Wilson was justified in killing Michael Brown, an unarmed young black man. He shot at 12 times and hit 6 times. There was no intention to apprehend him, but to murder him, and he was able to do that. That's part of a broader pattern, I might add, this kind of behavior. In many ways, Ferguson is a metaphor for urban America and African Americans under a kind of military occupation. It is Trayvon Martin in Florida. It is Diallo in New York. It is Rodney King in New York. It is Michael Brown in Ferguson. It is a pattern, and it must be spoken to in a much broader sense than just Ferguson as the kind of biopsy of a bigger cancer.
I wonder if I can put this point to you, sir, that in each case, and we know there is a lot of detail, and in this particular case, a jury sat and listened to many, many witnesses give their testimony. But in each case, after the event, people like yourself characterise the black victim as completely innocent and the white shooter, be it a civilian or in this case a policeman, as clearly in the wrong. But things are never that simple, are they? And does that simple binary decision really help things?
But in each instance, the black was unarmed and the white was armed. In each instance, the white had a badge, a gun, and had taken an oath and did not honor that oath. I mean, 4 police beat Rodney King nearly to death, and they walked away free. 4 shot times in the hallway of his home in New York. And so we find what's consistent is that. I think that the juries, I mean, from the Emmett Till jury walked away free. The Meg Evers jury let the killer walk away free. So there is an ugly pattern. It's a painful pattern, but it's real.
I wonder, are you disappointed in what President Obama said?
Well, I really wish he would have, given the pervasiveness of this crisis and the implications of it, he would have a White House conference on urban policy and violence. That he would really dust off the Kerner Commission report, increasingly racially polarized. But that report had recommendations as well as analysis. For example, if you enforce civil rights law, a Federal Employment Practices Commission, fair contract standards, that police department, 55 whites, 3 African Americans, almost no blacks on the fire department. Any agency of government receives federal funding that does not come up to those standards loses funding. He could immediately withdraw funding from agencies that do not, in fact, represent fair employment, whether that is police or whether firemen or whether it is judges. So far, the only action we've heard is if blacks do not be violent. We should not be violent for very practical reasons. Number one, you can't fight bullets with bricks. The second reason is that it diverts attention away from the real agenda. the gross disadvantages that black have in our society, and 3, there is no redemptive power in violence.
Stay with us. I want to introduce you to our regular contributors, Geoffrey Robinson in New York and Armstrong Williams. Let me go to you, if I may. You feel that the Reverend is mistaken in this view, that it's simply a case of injustice for a black guy?
You know, unfortunately, the issue here is law enforcement training. The issue is almost 90% of the time, police officers don't use deadly force to bring a resolution to those tragic situations. But obviously, Officer Wilson was young. He was 28 years old. He did not have much experience under his belt, and he was fearful, and he became human, and he reacted, and he shot him several times. And that is unfortunate. No one should die that way, and law enforcement officers should be better trained in how to address those situations. And I think you were correct when you asked the Reverend, is it always about race? I think when you cry racism, you don't even scratch the surface of what really happened and what really took place. And Jesse Jackson and others like him live in a bygone era where they feel that anytime it's black on white, it's racism. But when it's black on black in his own backyard in Chicago, where he should be cleaning up his own backyard and not just Ferguson, where the killing is almost like Iraq every day. And if that was what black on white crime in Chicago, he would have a different position. So you should ask Reverend Jackson, what is the difference in a black dying at the hands of a black or they dying at the hand of a law enforcement officer? We should value all life. No, it's not about race. It's about behavior. It's about a lack of parenting. It's about a lack of a fact that some of these young people do not respect authority. They have not been trained to respect authority. And it goes back to the breakdown of the family.
Reverend Jackson, what's your response?
Well, you know, there is an issue between intra or racial shootings where whites shoot whites and blacks shoot blacks, or that is domestic violence. And police who are sworn officers of the law with badge and gun who have another. And every report shows that Emmett Till and Meg Evans did not die for lack of home training.
We've lost the connection to the Reverend Jackson. Let me just bring in Geoffrey Robinson at that point. Geoffrey, it is true, isn't it, that there is still too few black police officers in many police forces, particularly perhaps in Ferguson, but in many police forces throughout the United States?
Yeah, clearly that's true. I mean, representative of the population, you can see that. In Ferguson, there have been racial problems before. This is not new to Ferguson. And Armstrong's acknowledgement that Officer Williams acted in a perhaps non-professional way is all the more reason why he should have been indicted by the grand jury, because we hold those police officers to a higher standard. We give them privilege. They must respond to that privilege by being held to a higher standard. The use of deadly force is something that is well defined. This man fired 12 bullets at the young man and did not use his radio more than, I think, twice, as I remember in the transcript. The grand jury system in this case was totally manipulated by Bob McCullough. He used it as a tool to prove his point long before he stepped up in front of those cameras. And if you look at the Florida Stand Your Ground laws and how that affected the life of Trayvon Martin, and if you look at the manipulation of the grand jury by McCullough in Ferguson, you understand that when it comes to white officers shooting black young men, the system, the justice system in this country is broken and needs to be fixed. And I'm much more incensed at the system than Armstrong seems to be. And I would even be very proud to be more incensed about it than the Reverend Jackson.
Armstrong, you're not incensed enough. You know, we should all be incensed at the loss of human lives. It should not matter that the race or the gender or the orientation of an individual. We should all be a part of these United States, and we should have the outrage. And when people like Reverend Sharpton and Jesse Jackson address this, they only address it from a certain color aspect. And so, no, I'm just saddened by the fact that parents lost their son. And obviously, if you looked at the videotape from the store, And the way this young man bristled in that store and his own behavior indicated that there were deeper problems that the parents were aware of but just could not address. And oftentimes the parents are in fear of their own children. It's unfortunate because Geoffrey and I are fortunate to have been reared in a family that is quite different. A lot of this is foreign to us. We really can't relate to it, but something has gone terribly wrong. And let me tell you, there's 500 Fergusons waiting to explode around the United States. And unless we get to the root of the problem instead of the surface of the problem, you will have more of this and not less.
Absolutely. In that sense, Armstrong is very, very right. There are serious socioeconomic problems that breed racial problems, but I'm not addressing it only in a racial way. I'm addressing it in looking at the justice system being broken. And may I say this, that it is absolutely wrong to blame the victim. This is not down to that young man acting the way he did and deserving to be killed. This is down to an abuse of the use of deadly force. And the American public has a right to see a trial, not a secret grand jury, but a trial where the Officer Wilson not only testifies, but is subject to cross-examination. And let the jury make its decision, not this secret process that Bob McCullough used. Shame on him.
Geoffrey and Armstrong, I'm sure we're going to have to come back to this topic and the question of the justice system on another occasion. But for the moment, thank you both very much.
St. Louis County Grand Jury declined to indict Officer Darren Wilson, 28, for firing 6 shots in an August confrontation that murdered 18-year-old Michael Brown.
Folks, keep going on the sidewalk, please.
The decision had been long awaited and followed rioting that resembled war zones footage in this predominantly black suburb of St. Louis. That's it. No indictment. What you gonna do?
Chuck Hagel has been no ordinary Secretary of Defense. As the first enlisted combat veteran to serve in that position, he understands our men and women like few others because he stood where they stood. He's been in the dirt and he's been in the mud. And that's established a special bond. He sees himself in them, and they see themselves in him. And their safety, their lives, have always been at the center of Chuck's service. When I asked Chuck to serve as Secretary of Defense, we were entering a significant period of transition. The drawdown in Afghanistan, the need to prepare our forces for future missions, and tough fiscal choices to keep our military strong and ready. Over nearly 2 years, Chuck has been an exemplary Defense Secretary, providing a steady hand as we modernized our strategy and budget to meet long-term threats while still responding to immediate challenges like ISIL and Ebola. Thanks to Chuck, our military is on a firmer footing, engaged in these missions and looking ahead to the future.
There are 2 simple questions to introduce the next topic. Did he jump or was he pushed? And was Chuck Hagel a failure or merely a scapegoat? Geoffrey, why don't you take this one first? Was Chuck Hagel a good secretary?
No, not necessarily. Did he jump or was he pushed? The answer to that question is yes. The answer to that question is absolutely yes. He jumped and he was pushed. And was he a failure and a scapegoat? The answer to that question is yes. He was both. The way in which he was let go was pretty uncomfortable and kind of clumsy on behalf of the administration. But he was not a very good Secretary of Defense. He came from the Senate, had no real administrative qualifications to do that. Interestingly enough, he was the first enlisted veteran ever to hold that position, which is an interesting thought. But he was clumsy right from the beginning. In his confirmation hearings, he didn't seem prepared. He made terrible gaffes by contradicting the administration policy and got the ISIS crisis all wrong. He had to go.
Armstrong, do you agree?
No, I don't think I agree with anything he just said, because it was Chuck Hagel when the administration was trying to play light of ISIS that Chuck Hagel immediately said this is a far more serious threat than this administration realized and that it is omitting. He has much administrative background. He's very sensitive to these issues, and he always challenged the president because he cared about this country first, not about some manipulative administration that was out of their league, whether it dealt with Putin and the downing of that jet, whether it dealt with his secret negotiations with Iraq and with Iran. Chuck Hagel was a principled guy, and sometimes you have to toe the line and support the administration, because if you don't, they see it as disloyalty. And obviously, Chuck Hagel was fed up because he realized that the direction this administration was taking this country was very dangerous in the short and long term. And so he had to make a decision that this is no longer he could associate himself or be a mouthpiece to advocate something that he did not believe that was in the best interest of this country. And so he and the president had to come to some kind of resolution, and the president, he had the right. He appointed him, and if Geoffrey is so concerned about the fact that he's alluding that he's incompetent, the president appointed him and they hailed him as would be a remarkable defense secretary. He said that when he nominated him, and he repeatedly echoed that during his tenure. So what is going on here is that you cannot abandon the ship and go on your own, even if you're right in principle in what you're saying. In other words, Chuck Hagel decided to leave because he cared more about the United States than the president's missed agenda, which was not working at home and abroad.
Yeah, but anyone can claim they're doing things in belief that they're supporting the United States. Just because the administration or your president doesn't agree with your policy, I suppose if you can't fix that disagreement, you have to go, Geoffrey, don't you? You can't just work together anymore.
Armstrong always baffles me as to what planet he's living on. Chuck Hagel was praised during the confirmation hearings by the president, saying he'll be a great secretary, and it was a mistake. You know, people do make mistakes. He didn't. I'm not at all denying his patriotism. I'm not at all denying that he cares about the country. He does, but he just wasn't able to handle the Defense Department. This is a humongous operation that, and I don't know where he had all this great administrative experience, seeing as how he'd been a senator for all those years. The point is that he had to go. It wasn't working out. And I don't think this reflects badly on the president. I think it's just it happens in administrations where the usefulness of a secretary is outlived and it's time to move on.
Or there's internal politics and internal power play. For those of us who don't know about Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, Armstrong, give us a few lines on her. Do you think she's responsible really for getting Hagel moved away?
You know, unfortunately, Susan Rice is a very bright and able in her position, but she's such a polarizing figure. She's created unnecessary enemies. She's very difficult to work with. Her relationship with Chuck Hagel, I would be shocked if Geoffrey disagreed with me on this, is no different than anybody else she's often butt heads with. She's just very difficult and unreasonable to get along with, and she just doesn't have the personality to build relationships and build cooperation, not only with people in the administration, but around the world. That's just her reputation.
Geoffrey, Armstrong, thank you very much indeed. The starting pistol has been fired and the Christmas shopping season is officially underway. After Thanksgiving, there's Black Friday, or should it be Black Weekend, when we lay siege to the malls and hammer the online shopping sites. Well, let's ask Geoffrey and Armstrong what they're doing over the weekend. Have you been making your credit card bleed, Geoffrey?
No, it bleeds all on its own, and you will not find me standing online or in a tent on Thanksgiving night in front of a big box store. That's actually to be avoided at all costs. I mean, it's not only a dangerous place because there are stabbings and people show up with guns and there are fist fights and people get arrested, all trying to buy a 50-inch television set for $28, of which there is one. But it's also the fact that a survey just released said that 93% of all the goods on sale in the big box stores for Black Friday are over a year old, and that if you really want to buy a 50-inch television set, the best time is not the day after Thanksgiving. It's a week before the Super Bowl when they all go on sale.
OK. Armstrong, is this capitalism gone mad, or is this just big business working well?
Listen, I have a different perspective from Geoffrey. Obviously, I have a lot of women and children in my life, so I spend so much time working in my various businesses that during this time of Black Friday following Thanksgiving, the time that I really get a chance to spend quality time, whether it's my mother, the kids, is on Black Friday. It's whatever they enjoy doing. And I find it to be lots of fun to watch how people wait in these long lines to try to buy these products. And whether you say it's a year old or not, I have a television I actually bought on Black Friday a few years ago, and it's still one of the best televisions that I purchased. So listen, you can make great savings, and also you contribute to the economy. A lot of businesses have been hurt by the slowing of the economy, and so if you can go out and shop a little bit to stimulate businesses and give people hope, I'm all for that. So, you know, it's fun for me. I enjoy doing it. I'm a morning person, so when I'm not in the gym 4:30 a.m. on Friday morning, I'll certainly be standing in line, probably waiting the doors to open at Best Buy.
Armstrong, Geoffrey, it's a bit late for me to wish you happy Thanksgiving, but thank you for being with us again today, and have a good holidays weekend. And who knows, there's always Cyber Monday. That's it for this edition of The Debate. Until next time, goodbye.